Hello, hello, hola, hola a todos. Hola, hola. Bienvenidos a Lima. Welcome to Lima, Peru. Welcome to the beautiful capital of this amazing country known as the country or the land of the Incas. My name is Vanessa Vasquez. I am your Lima City tour guide, and today I want to show you the main square of Lima. We're going to have a nice walk in the historic center of Lima, which is mainly pedestrian. As you can see, we have cars passing also every once in a while here. Honestly, before it was a pedestrian zone, this part of the city, it was really hectic, very crazy, because traffic in Lima is very bad. There are days when things get worse than others. That is completely unpredictable. But the historic center of Lima turned into a pedestrian zone since the pandemic. There was a project to do it pedestrian before, of course, but it was complicated to make this possible. So now, well, because of the pandemic and the low amount of transit in the city, traffic and people out of their houses, it became a possibility. So now we're going to begin with this nice walk in the historic center of Lima. We're going in direction to the main square of the city. And as I promised, I wanted to show you the state of the historic center currently. So first of all, I would like to tell you a little bit about me. I am an official tour guide here in Lima, Peru. My job is being a guide and also a tour director, a tour leader for tour groups in Peru. For many years. I've been doing this since 2006 when I became an official tour guide, and Downtown Lima is my second home. I spend a lot of time in this section. I was born in Lima, so I know my city very well. And as a tour guide, one gets to know the history of our cities more profoundly, more in depth. So also I started to do tours in English since around 2007 more or less. So I've been using also English quite a lot for many years. Most of the tour guides we have in Peru, most of the official tour guides we have in Peru are able to speak at least two languages, Spanish and English. So if you're coming to Lima, I highly want to encourage you to use the service of official tour guides. We have not just a career that offers guiding as a professional job in Peru, also we have laws that support and take care of the job tour guides do in my country, not just in my city. So we are seeing here some beautiful examples of colonial architecture, and we can also observe here like the state of some of the colonial houses. The oldest houses we have in Lima, the oldest ones we can see in the historic center, date back to usually the beginning of the 17th century, the 1600s, of course with major modifications, because the houses in the colonial times were usually damaged by earthquakes. So we have lots of earthquakes in Lima. So for that reason, houses were always damaged, like could be sometimes according to the earthquake, sometimes in little manner, sometimes in great manner. So the modifications were like big, huge. So what you can see here, for example, is a house that has in the upper part the year 1883. And that is because the house last modification, renovation, major renovation was in the 19th century. But all of this section was occupied since the time of the coming of the conquistadors to this territory, to Lima, in the 16th century. We're talking about the year 1535, when the Spanish conquistadors started their dominion of this territory. They started to conquer this territory that was before their presence here an indigenous town. We had indigenous people in this territory, and we know not really a lot about that indigenous group. We have information from the chronicles of the Spanish of their presence, but they didn't make sure of giving us information of how their houses look like, how their temples look like in this zone in particular. It's like, in a way, they sweep away all of the history or the presence of the indigenous from this zone because they wanted to take over all of this section. So what we're seeing in the front is another example of colonial architecture, civilian architecture in the historic center. This is a house that in this moment is being used for plays. It is sort of like a theater, and it is a theater for a group of actors who sort of like are independent. So they are doing independent plays, and the place, the scenario is really pretty. So you look at, for example, the detail of the decoration in the arch. Hola, K-pop. Hello, amiga. So you can see here, for example, the sort of like the rescued original decoration or fresco of the house. Back in the colonial times, houses were much more decorated than even what you can imagine they were, because many of the colonial houses in Lima, they are now having walls all in one color, but originally these houses were covered with designs, flowers, sometimes geometrical designs with the influence of the Moorish style. So this house has another particularity. Well, it keeps the traditional open patio, the open courtyard, or saguan, as we call it in Spanish. That's a Spanish, let's say, word that is used also in Spain for this type of open patios. And this house is just 1 floor tall, as you can see. But houses in the colonial times could be higher, could be taller. We're going to see a couple of examples in a moment. So you can also see another interesting detail from the Spanish influence in Peru, and is this. I don't know if you can recognize this element here, this material. These are tiles. So this is, of course, restored tile. Probably the design, the original design is this one, if not is the original one. But also we can see some newer, I can definitely see the difference here, a newer addition to this pattern that you see here. So in the colonial times, the houses in Lima were not just looking in the exterior to be very Spanish, also in the interior, in every single aspect of the house, in every single type of decoration, they were emulating the architecture and the design and the decoration of the southern part of Spain. We had a massive influx of immigrants from Spain, in particular from the south of Spain, center south of Spain, territories which had a very strong Arab influence, because Spain had about 800 years of Arab influence, and that's the reason why in this territory, in Peru, we're going to see traces of Arab influence. It is just because the Spanish brought that influence with them. We were not Muslims, so we were not worship, the same gods or same religion of other cultures in the world besides the one from the Spanish. Actually, we had Inquisition here in Peru, meaning that we couldn't really observe or even embrace religions which were not the one of the Spanish, which was the Catholic religion. But that doesn't mean that in the art we didn't have influences from other parts in the world and other cultures. Catholic religion itself is a combination, is a fusion of different traditions and religions even. So in this corner you can see a pretty design. This is a traditional colonial house, Casa Colonial, we will say in Spanish. The Casa Colonial is especially the balconies, the wooden balconies, colonial balconies also I'll call, are sort of like the signature element of the colonial architecture. So you can see that this, for example, this balcony goes exactly in the corner, like all match perfectly the corner. What's the material that was used to make this balcony? Well, this is wood. This is just wood. Wood, and of course, nowadays the additional element was glass for the windows, and metal in the corner, because unfortunately not just earthquakes are damaging architecture, also the passing of the time, the actual use of the house, the weight of the people walking here. And we're talking about houses that are 300 years old, 200 years old houses without any restoration. They are eventually started to fall. Some balconies are started to fall or incline. So but I said that, for example, the glass here in the window is something new or newer in terms of the concept of how the house should look like originally. Because originally the houses in the colonial times were not just having elements such as, for example, the tiles, the Spanish tiles, the civilian tiles, or the Arab influence in the decoration, or the patios, the saguanes inside the houses. They also have another element visible from the outside, which was the little gates. We had gates in the windows. So those gates, which we don't see anymore because they were taken out, because they were old-fashioned in the time of the 19th century, became old-fashioned. That's also after the time of the independence from Spain, when everything that said out loud, Spain, or, being Spanish, was sort of taken aside, because there was, of course, sort of a desire of separation from any Spanish elements. Look at, for example, through here, we can see the insides of the house. I find this very, very curious. There is a beautiful pillar over here, which maybe I can zoom a little bit. So it's a pillar painted in red color, very pretty. And there were internal patios in the house, or little, like we say in Spanish, tragaluz, which is windows that are in the ceiling to allow light to come into the house, into rooms that were not necessarily attached to an internal patio, right? So the little gates that were on the windows, where nowadays we see the windows of the balconies, sort of work were there with the intention of allowing light to come into the rooms, into the house, into the spaces internal, in the domestic world of these colonial people, but also permitted people to have or to keep their privacy. Also, in that way, people will not be seen from the outside. For example, now when we look at here, from here into the balcony, we can clearly see what's inside. We can see that there is, another door over there, or at least I can see the door. I hope you can see it. There's a door here. There's nothing here. But if there was people talking here, you would clearly see what they were talking about, probably with expressions of their faces. So there will not be any privacy. But in the colonial times, people really appreciate privacy. And, it was a complete different type of let's say temper, character. People love to gossip, nowadays we all do, but they wanted to be discreet, and they wanted to live lives in the most discreet way. So that's why these nets, or this sort of gates didn't allow people to be seen in the privacy of the house. Women in the colonial times also added into their fashion a way, an element in their dressing code that was also borrowed from the Arab culture, which was the veil. In the women of Peru, indigenous women of Peru, didn't use veils over their faces in the pre-colonial times, in the indigenous period of our history. We women were quite, able to expose their faces with no limitations. They even use beautiful decoration like nose rings, facial painting, even facial tattoos in some cases. So women were empowered also, depending on the culture, the pre-Hispanic culture, as much as men. Um, but women in the colonial times change, like the concept of women changed completely in the colonial times. So women started to use veils. I will go back to the veil. I just want to let you know that the house that you see here in the distance is a house from the 18th century, 1700s, and it is a colonial house with a particular detail. Probably you cannot see it in detail from here, but if I zoom, you will see it better. So look at this section. So how many floors the house has? So please help me. I know that we have some people joining the live. Later also this is going to be a recorded event. So if you see it as a recorded event, also would like you to count in this moment how many floors you see here in this house. So let's do it together, right? Uno, dos, tres, cuatro. There are 4 floors, 4 levels. We can even add, like a 5th one if that section, could be also visited, So yes, indeed, Cap. We have a skyscraper of the colonial times. It was not usual that houses in the colonial times will have this type of sort of like height. Because of the earthquakes. So this was a massive house, and at the times of its construction, of its creation, it belonged to a wealthy family of Lima that had, investments in ships, in the trading, and the legend says that from the top of the house, from here, they could see the ocean. And well, it makes completely sense because Lima was flat as a pancake back then, and although we are more or less 16 kilometers away from the ocean, from the sea, from here, they can definitely see from there the ocean, the ships, everything, right? So Lima was very different back then. Also, I just noticed something really interesting, that it was covered. Let me just de-zoom here. It was covered below the pavement in the floor. So we are doing now some works of restoration in the historic center, converting also the historic center into a fully pedestrian section. And look at this. Do you see what this is, or do you recognize what this is? So if we move a little bit forward, probably you're going to see it better. So these are the lines of the tram. So we used to have trams, by the way, in Lima. I know of the trams from, history books, from chronicles, old, diaries from the people of the, let's say, 19th century, early 20th century. So we have here the evidence that we used to have trams crisscrossing the historic center, which was the way how people used to move in Lima. That was the preferred system to go. But, well, now we switch for vehicles, making Lima not just a very crazy city in terms of traffic, also not very efficient in terms of the traffic in the city. So look at also from here, we're going to look up as we go to the Main Square of Lima. We are walking to the Main Square. Look at the width of the balconies. So we can see that the balconies, although they look sort of like very little, maybe, like a few centimeters separated from the walls of the houses, in reality, they are quite wide. They are wide. And all of the houses back in the colonial times used to have balconies. If you live in a house, that was sort of like a middle class house or upper class house, of course, you should have a balcony as a way to distinguish yourself from the poor. And also, it was the ultimate element of decoration back then. So look at the width of these balconies. You can see that 2 people could be, standing one next to the other, to have an idea of the width of the balcony. And we know of many different stories of processions, for example, back in the colonial times, from where people used to throw flowers or petals of flowers to the images of the Virgin Mary, for example, Jesus Christ, that were walking, like being walked in the streets of Lima from the balconies. Also, balconies in the beginning were places for socializing, also like in terms of the relatives, families, members of the visitors to the house. If you were of the entire trust of the owner of the house, you will be invited to the balcony to see the street, to be part of a procession, and also you could talk and you can sort of like a gossip, if you wish, but in privacy, in full privacy. Look at this, for example. This balcony gives you an idea of the width, so it's quite big, quite wide, and very comfortable also. But later, when the time passed, the balconies started to lose their importance. They started to lose, the value they had, because people were not anymore that sort of like a private. They were not so introverted culturally. So people didn't need it really that space anymore, just besides being a part of the decoration of the house. And that's why also we still have those balconies nowadays, because they were a reflection of the wealth of the family and how old the wealth is or was, right? So for example, an old royal family, of a royal lineage family, will never sacrifice the wooden balconies of their houses, although this could be old-fashioned, because that represented the family tradition and the status. Look at, for example, this one here. This is a really huge example of how, an extravagant example of how wooden balconies could turn. Look how big this one is. So we are talking about probably, let's say, 50 meters of balcony only, at least. Maybe it's a little bit more. I'm trying to calculate, maybe up to 70 meters of wooden balcony. So you need to be very skillful to create something like this as well. And also notice that there are no real angles, to sustain the weight of the balcony. So it was made in such a way that the balcony, will be into the sort of like the base of the second floor. And in that way, it will also keep stable and will last for a long time, right? So, but nowadays the balconies are in big risk because, they were not properly protected. Many of them survived many earthquakes, and they were not able to handle 3 to 4, maybe 10 earthquakes, strong earthquakes, without a proper restoration, because these balconies were always restored, they were always kept, they were always reinforced. Also, another thing that happened is that because many families embrace modernity and new styles, and let's say, for example, the neoclassic style or the Art Nouveau style, which Art Nouveau became very, very popular here in Peru in at the last decades of the 19th century. So the houses started to take elements from the Art Nouveau style, the flowery details, those organic elements hanging from the windows, sometimes flowers and so on. The wooden balconies became old, right? And they started to disappear, they started to vanish, and they were replaced, and now they are true gems of the city. So now we're going to get to see the Main Square of Lima, and I hope that you are also enjoying this tour, this little walking tour into the historic center. I know I have some people joining live, so thank you so much for joining this live tour. I do tours of Lima, of different parts of the city of Lima, different zones. Lima is not just the colonial part of Lima. It's just pretty. We have Miraflores, we have Barranco, we have also museums here, archaeological sites, and so on. We have markets also that are very interesting. So, please stay tuned to my upcoming events. You can give me a follow if you haven't yet, and also help me with a like. That would be super fantastic. You can also share this event after it comes to an end. When it will conclude, maybe a little bit later in the day, I'm going to be uploading the recording so you can see it again as many times as you wish. So we are here at the main square of Lima. Lima's main square, Plaza Mayor, also known, is the section of the city where our history as a colonial city is started, because our history is older than the Spanish conquest. It wouldn't be fair to say that the history of Lima started with the conquest and the foundation of Lima in the year 1535, because Lima is one of the oldest territories of the country, and the oldest culture of Peru was born not far away from Lima, Caral culture, about 5,000 years ago. So we have evidences in Lima that date 2,000 years ago, at least, right? So this is fairly new for us. But Lima is old. It's very old. We're seeing here some pretty buildings, historic buildings. We have here the house of the president of Peru. Nowadays it's a she. We have a female president, Dina Boluarte. In another occasion, we're going to talk about politics. I don't want to make bitter this event, but we have a female president now. That is the Cathedral of Lima. Let me turn in this direction. So you can see also the cathedral. The Cathedral of Lima is a museum as well. It is open as a church on Sundays, Sunday morning, and in the rest of the days of the week, it is a museum. You can see people queuing also to get into the cathedral through there. The admission fee to the cathedral is 10 soles per person. That is about $3 per person. The Archbishop Palace, which is administratively connected with the cathedral, but the same administration, same owner, it is also a museum. Behind the fountain. This fountain, by the way, is very important. It is a fountain from year 1651. That's also the entrance into the Archbishop Palace. And we can also observe the rest of the buildings around. We have buildings from the 1940s. They look very colonial. They look like having wooden balconies. They look like sort of like having that air of the other buildings we've seen, but they are modern. They are neo-colonial. There is a club, the Union Club. It's a private club, by the way, but it has a restaurant that you can access. You don't need to be part of or member of the club to join the restaurant. And next we have the City Hall of Lima. Lima City Hall is also from the 1940s. And is the office of the mayor of Lima. So, we were able to have a nice walk in the historic center. I hope you enjoy this small walking tour. And we're going to be joining also to other places, museums, sites soon virtually. So I hope you are able to follow my channel for more information and for more tours. I'm trying to do tours pretty much last minute as tourism is coming back to Lima. So every time I have the chance to do something fun and entertaining, I also do a tour and I try to share with you what's new, what's happening, up to date. So, thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Cap. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you to my friends who were able to join. And if you're seeing this as a recording, I hope you enjoy this little walking tour. Give me a like if you can, please. That will help me a lot. And see you very soon in another occasion. Here is always your guide and friend in Lima, Vanessa. If you need also a guide in Lima, or you know someone that needs a tour guide in Lima, of course, you can let me know. I am here, very happy to support, help, give you information. I am also a travel advisor, travel consultant, so please send me a message. And lastly, if you're not able to use me as your guide, which is understandable, we have many excellent tour guides in Lima. Please use official tour guides. We have credentials, we have studied, we have the expertise, we are licensed, so please use official tour guides in Lima and in Peru. Best to you all. Have a lovely rest of the day and see you very soon. Bye-bye. Ciao.